You're at a family dinner, telling a story from your childhood, the time the power went out during a thunderstorm, your dad lit candles and you all played cards until midnight. You remember the flicker of the flame. You remember the smell of rain through the screen door, and then your sister looks at you strangely and says that never happened to you, it happened to her, and you weren't even in the house that year. You're not lying, you're not confused. The memory is vivid, detailed, emotionally real, and it is, in some sense, false. So how does a brain built to remember the past end up manufacturing a past that never existed? Start with the first number that should reframe the question. Researchers running controlled memory experiments have repeatedly managed to implant entire false memories in ordinary healthy people, memories of events that never happened, simply by suggesting them convincingly enough and letting time do the rest. That's not a glitch confined to a damaged mind. That's a demonstration of what the machinery does by default. A system this easy to redirect wasn't malfunctioning when it handed you a false memory of your own childhood. It was doing, imperfectly, exactly what it was built to do, and the mistake was a side effect worth understanding, rather than an error worth dismissing. The first layer is the biggest myth to unlearn. Memory doesn't work like a recording. Cognitive scientists studying recall have argued for decades that the brain doesn't retrieve the past so much as rebuild it, pulling fragments, feelings, and general knowledge together each time a memory is summoned and lightly rewriting the file before putting it back. It's called reconstructive memory, and it means every act of remembering is also, quietly, an act of recreating. The candlelight might be real. The card game might have happened on a different night, in a different year, to a different sibling. Your brain wasn't lying to you. It was doing what it always does, filling gaps with plausible material and calling the result a memory. But reconstruction alone doesn't explain why the gaps get filled with such conviction, and that's where the second mechanism enters. Source monitoring. Researchers studying how the brain tags its own information have proposed that every memory arrives bundled not just with content, but with an unstated claim about where that content came from, whether you lived it, heard it, imagined it, or dreamed it. That tagging system is fallible. A story told often enough at family dinners can get filed under lived experience instead of heard secondhand, because the emotional and sensory detail of a well-told story can outcompete the thin, faded trace of the actual, unremarkable original. The brain isn't checking a fact, it's guessing at a label, and the guess isn't always right. Then there's imagination, and this is where things get stranger. Some researchers working on the constructive nature of memory have proposed that the same neural circuitry used to remember the past is largely the same circuitry used to imagine the future, running forward instead of backward through the same reconstructive machinery. That overlap isn't incidental. Simulating a future negotiation, rehearsing an apology, picturing a trip not yet taken, all of it draws on the same stitched-together, detail-borrowing process as recalling an actual afternoon from 10 years ago. A brain that reused one system for both memory and imagination gained enormous flexibility. It could plan, rehearse, and prepare for situations it had never lived through. But a system built to imagine convincingly and a system built to remember accurately were never going to stay perfectly separate, and every so often the imagined and the remembered would blur into one file. Schema does quieter work underneath all of this. An early and still influential line of memory research found that people don't recall isolated facts so much as slot new experiences into existing mental frameworks. Expectations about how a dinner party goes, how a thunderstorm feels, how a family holiday tends to unfold. Those frameworks are efficient. They let a mind store the gist of 1,000 ordinary days without wasting effort on details that rarely matter. But efficiency comes at a cost. When the specific details of an actual memory fade, the schema quietly steps in to supply what probably happened, and the substitution feels seamless because it was built from the same general truths the real memory would have contained anyway. Emotion adds one more layer and it cuts in the opposite direction from what most people assume. Memories tied to strong feeling, a wedding, a car accident, the day of a major public event, tend to feel unusually vivid and certain, what researchers call flashbulb memories. And yet, studies that check these memories against contemporaneous records have found they can drift and distort over years, while the person holding them remains completely confident they're accurate. The vividness isn't a guarantee of truth. It's a separate quality entirely, generated by the emotional weight of the moment, and it can attach itself just as strongly to a detail the reconstruction got wrong as to one it got right. Social influence is the piece biology can't fully explain on its own. Watch what happens when a group of people who witness the same event start comparing notes, and a pattern shows up reliably. One person's confident, detailed account can quietly overwrite another person's fainter, less certain one, a phenomenon researchers call memory conformity. It doesn't require malice or even a claim that's true. It only requires confidence and repetition, delivered by someone the listener trusts, at a moment when the listener's own memory is still a little soft and reconstructible. Families do this constantly without noticing every time a favorite story gets retold. Whole communities do it too, particularly around disputed or traumatic events, where a shared account can end up more agreed upon than accurate. None of this is written down anywhere the way a fact is written down, because the whole system runs beneath conscious awareness. It lives in the siblings' retelling that quietly moves a story from one childhood to another, in the shape a mental schema hands you when the real details have faded, in the flashbulb clarity of a moment, your own mind never fully preserved intact. Every act of remembering is also a small act of revision, and most of the time nobody notices, because the revised version feels exactly as real as the truth would have. Then the courtroom entered the picture and the stakes stopped being personal. Eyewitness testimony was long treated as close to airtight, a person describing what they saw, plainly and reliably. Researchers studying wrongful convictions have found that mistaken eyewitness identification played a role in a large share of cases where DNA evidence later exonerated the accused, cases where a confident, detailed, sincerely held memory turned out to be wrong. Some researchers studying memory and the legal system argue this gap between how certain a memory feels and how accurate it actually is may be the single most consequential blind spot the justice system has been slow to correct. But the underlying mechanism was never a courtroom-specific defect. It's the same reconstructive process running in every mind, in every family dinner, every time someone says, "I remember it exactly." Today, you don't need a controlled laboratory experiment to watch this happen. You need a group chat arguing about how a night out actually went, or a sibling insisting a childhood memory belongs to them, or a photograph that quietly replaces the version of an event you used to carry in your head. Underneath the disagreement, the same ancient math is still running. The brain doesn't store the past. It rebuilds it, every time, out of fragments, feeling, and whatever plausible material happens to be lying around. Your memory buried that logic so deep it doesn't feel like reconstruction anymore. It just feels like remembering. And it is, in its own way, remembering, built one reassembled fragment at a time, by a system that was never trying to give you a perfect record. It was only ever trying to give you a usable one.